Welcome to this week's post-cabinet media conference, and we have with us here today the Honourable Prime Minister, and I'll, without any hesitation, invite the Prime Minister to come and address us. Dr. Rowley.
Thank you very much, Minister Young. Good afternoon to you members of the media. Good afternoon to the members of the listening public and viewing public. To members of the media, I want to apologize for probably wasting your time on, when was that? Tuesday night. It was my intention to have had the press conference upon arrival at Piarco, but we did have some challenges with the airline, and we came in at 11 o'clock on that night. And I'm sure that you would have probably been more on the sleepy side and much prefer to be more alert when I'm in front of you. So I'm glad that you are able to come out this afternoon to assist me in informing the public as to what we were engaged in during that visit to the United Kingdom. I led a very substantial delegation to the UK last week. What we did was to combine the requirement to be at the CHOGM in the United Kingdom with the need to advance and conclude some very far-reaching discussions which were underway in the energy sector of our economy. You may recall that last year March, I went to Houston, and the main assignment then was to advance to facilitate the conclusion of a gas price contract between the NGC and the oil companies that were producing in Trinidad and Tobago. During that visit in March of last year, the issue in front of us was whether, in fact, we could have had an agreement in Trinidad and Tobago on a gas price in the very difficult circumstances of the changed gas market and our exploration environment, if we could have found that agreement to allow investment to flow into the hydrocarbon sector in Trinidad and Tobago. The NGC and the companies, mainly BP, which is the largest one, could not come to an agreement, even though the negotiations had gone on for a fair period of time and had been stopped. At that stage, as Prime Minister, I intervened and got NGC and BP to close the gap between the two companies. That was a far-reaching development, because having got that agreement with BP and NGC, it triggered activities with other companies like EOG and Shell. And immediately, the parked investment in the exploration in Trinidad and Tobago was released, and tremendous exploration activity commenced and is continuing in Trinidad and Tobago. So that objective was achieved, and our medium-term and long-term future was secure, having got a gas price, and we remain in the business. Without a gas price, the consequences could have been quite far-reaching and quite grave. But of course, there were other issues which we continue to work on, and this cabinet has a functioning energy subcommittee of the cabinet, which is made up of all the technical people, experienced technical people in the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Finance, and other relevant parties, functioning as a Trinidad and Tobago resource in treating with and managing the complexities that are with us as challenges in the hydrocarbon sector. The hydrocarbon sector being so important to Trinidad and Tobago, these challenges are in fact quite serious. So the Energy Subcommittee of the Cabinet has been functioning, and I would have mentioned before, there were some issues in there where Minister Motley had been invited in, and he helped us to manage these negotiations of the gas contracts and so on, we got to a point where you would have seen in one situation the gas contracts went into a month-to-month arrangement and eventually came to a standstill, and the supply of gas was discontinued to one entity and so on. These are the realities of the environment in which we're operating. Thankfully, eventually there was agreement and we have restarted those operations. There are other discussions taking place with other companies of the same issue, but as it gets further along, it should get easier as people see what is possible and what is doable. And I think everybody wants to be in a position where they can win for their shareholders. And I maintain in these matters that I am the chief spokesperson and operative for the shareholders, namely the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because we are shareholders in this matter. Having said that, we have some issues to address. One of those issues was the whole re-entry into Trinidad and Tobago of Shell. Shell, in a very short space of time, came back into Trinidad and Tobago and acquired the assets of British Gas, of ENI, of Centrica, and Repsol. What that has done in a overnight, pretty much overnight, is to have made Shell a major player in the LNG business and holding on to serious assets outside of the Point 14 area in Mosuva. So Shell's presence in Trinidad and Tobago had to be understood, and I dare say has to be managed. Also, all of this was happening at the time of the collapse of the oil price, and the significant loss of our revenue and so on. But there were a number of outstanding issues, not the least of which you would have heard me raise at the Energy Spotlight, which was a unique event that we hosted a few weeks ago, so as to inform the population of what our circumstances were and how we were treating with it, and also to inform the energy sector participants where Trinidad and Tobago stood on these matters. And we raised some queries with respect to the country's earnings, the interpretation of contracts, and so on. And the oil companies agreed to sit down with us and work through these issues. This approach was initiated immediately after the Spotlight discussion and continued all the way to the London meetings, because we arranged to meet at the top of these companies at the headquarters in London, where the headquarters are. So we were able to deal with and talk to the people who make the decisions in these companies and to put to them at that level Trinidad and Tobago's position. I took with me for this meeting both the meeting with the companies and the British government and some other areas, and the heads of government meeting. I took with me Senator Dennis Moses, who is our foreign minister, and CARICOM affairs minister as well. Senator Franklin Khan as Minister of Energy, who has the responsibility for the areas of hydrocarbon exploration and government business and country business there. Minister Stuart Young, who carries the portfolio of Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, and the Minister in the Attorney General's Office. And we together formed the government team at the level of the cabinet, and we took a fairly large delegation of technocrats from the Ministry of Energy, from the NGC, and also advisors to the various ministers in here. So we had a fairly strong delegation, and we met with the top of the Shell and BP operations. On Monday, we arrived in UK on Monday, and on that very day we met with Shell. We met with Shell on that day by prior arrangement, and we picked up the issues that we had to, which were confronting us. And we received from the company their program. The most important thing is that there is a commitment from Shell to expand and accelerate its operations in Trinidad and Tobago, because they have seen that there is good potential in our hydrocarbon basin. But even as this is happening, the question of the revenue side of things, who is earning what, form the major part of our discussion. And what contracts and what arrangements in the marketing of LNG need to be reviewed. You would have heard it said by some people here in Trinidad and Tobago that you can't talk this kind of way or these kinds of things because contracts are sacred, and if the country raises any dissatisfaction with these things, you will chase away investment and so on and so on. Nothing is further from the truth. The opposite is what is the truth, and the opposite is what has been the direction of this government, and it is the opposite that has put us in a position to review our circumstance and to improve it. Shell has indicated a desire to work with the government and other shareholders at Atlantic LNG to simplify the arrangements and increase the government's revenue streams. Shell has made an interim proposal to the government aimed at increasing the government revenue from LNG. That matter is to be finalized by further discussions which are to take place in the next few days. Shell made its commitment to Trinidad and Tobago, and the government informed Shell of the concerns about possible loss of revenue through revenue leakage over the years in the LNG business. The government indicated that the returns to the Treasury were not what they should be, and there are concerns with respect to the marketing arrangements. As an example, the difficulties being faced with the downstream petrochemical industry were also discussed, and it was agreed that the parties need to work together to simplify the LNG business arrangements in a transparent manner, leading to a fair rate of return to Shell and to the government. So in other words, what exists now is not cast in stone, and the company has agreed to review it with the objective as described so that the government could have an increase in its revenues from this major business in Trinidad and Tobago. At the end of the discussions with Shell, the parties agreed to establish what we call empowered negotiation teams that would meet from the middle of May, and that these teams will give priority to working on a number of matters, including but not limited to Atlantic LNG and the socio-economic contributions of the LNG business in Trinidad and Tobago, and the extensions of various upstream production sharing contracts and the Venezuelan gas initiative, where Shell is a partner with us, and new domestic gas arrangements. That is a huge portfolio of review for changes where Trinidad and Tobago expects to come out better than going where we went in. These empowered negotiating teams are mainly people who will be authorized to make binding negotiation positions for the government of Trinidad and Tobago to consider in finalizing in short order and as a matter of urgency with these companies. The following day, we met with BP, very much along the same lines. But BP, as you know, has been with us for quite some time and produces 75% or thereabouts of our natural gas and some of our oil. And we did have, in the general discussions, like Shell, BP's commitment to Trinidad and Tobago is without question, and their commitment to invest and make further investment is there. The government indicated its concerns with respect to a number of fiscal issues, and these were discussed at length in a negotiating environment. The revenue situation was emphasized, and the parties, as with the discussion with Shell, discussed Atlantic LNG and the various trains. As you know, there are 4 LNG trains with different ownerships. The government has a significant, while not large, but significant equity in train 1. We have none in trains 2 and 3. We have some on train 4, but the arrangements are all separate and apart and quite different, even though it's one outline, is one company, but the trains are owned and operated and in different ways. So this whole question of streamlining the LNG business in Trinidad and Tobago is a very serious and fundamental business, because it covers the whole question of who owns what, who markets what, who gets what cargoes, and who gets what revenues. So we are revisiting this thing which we have created and with which we have had reason to say that we are dissatisfied with the outcome, and the companies have agreed that this should be done. How it would be done is to be worked out during the month of May by these empowered negotiating teams. There were a number of fiscal issues from early on where there were our concerns that we had a case to be made for benefits to be had to Trinidad and Tobago, where BP was not able to meet its own liabilities to Trinidad and Tobago. We talk about these in the context of legacy items, meaning that we were arguing about this for quite some time as to what is involved in compensation for this liability which BP has to Trinidad and Tobago for fiscal gas matters. And we've got some agreement on that. And in the next few days, we expect to sign off on an agreement where BP would pay to Trinidad and Tobago upwards of $1 billion in these legacy matters, which we have made claims of. We, on the other hand, owe the company a significant amount of VAT, which is to be returned, and we have to work out an arrangement as to how we will discharge this liability over time. The company understands our fiscal position and indicated that they are prepared to work with the government on this matter of the VAT refunds. We also got an agreement to reduce the ceiling on how much they could carry forward in tax liabilities from one year to another, which had the effect of reducing government revenues. We are to finalize the actual figure, but we are at a position where an agreement is doable, and in the next few days that will be signed off on as the parties get to the stage of inking these agreements. Most importantly is that recently you would have heard the government of Trinidad and Tobago taking a policy position that insofar as we are recognizing that gas, like oil, is a wasting asset, we should not confine ourselves, especially in these difficult times. We should not confine ourselves to only expecting to get revenue from petroleum profit tax or from the profits of these companies. To do so is to, one, expose ourselves to no revenues or very reduced revenues, because the companies have a million ways of ensuring that they report minor profits or none at all. And of course, insofar as the exploiting of the revenue of the resources are reducing what is in effect the heritage of the country, we ought to get a benefit in the form of royalty from any and all persons and entities who extract and deplete that. That is the position of the government of Trinidad and Tobago today. So where royalties were not being levied, in the last budget, you would have heard the Minister of Finance speak about a royalty on natural gas of 12.5%, which is to be paid on the production of natural gas at the wellhead. So it matters not what the profit is at the end of the day, or who gets what. Once you are extracting that gas from our heritage, our resource base, you are to pay that tax up front as a royalty. That is normal in the business. We have had some royalty in some other areas, And we've also had some contracting arrangement where royalty was circumscribed, meaning that people had looked ahead and said, well, look, if a tax like royalty comes along, it would be paid by the state, where the state is a partner in those sharing contracts. What we have been able to negotiate and get the agreement of BP on is that from 2018 to 2020, and we are saying hopefully beyond, BP, while legally is contracted not to pay this royalty, have agreed, at least in the first instance, and that last phrase is ours, but BP has agreed between 2018 and 2020 to not pass on the royalty, but to accept and to pay it, even though legally they could have refused. That in itself is worth a significant amount of money, which would have been passed on to the NGC, but which is not now going to form part of the NGC expenses. And of course, BP has a number of acreage locations which it has to compete for exploration funding within the company. But some of those contracts are coming to an end either soon or almost in the near future. And they would like a longer term to be available to them now so as to be able to commit resources for exploration in those fields. The government has agreed to look at that, to see which fields are those, and to consider, without prejudice, to consider renewing and extending those contracts so as to allow significant investment to take place in the medium term and to ensure that we keep exploring to have a stream of gas coming to our onshore business. And we do that by allowing the life of the contracts to be extended a little earlier so that BP could commit. BP has committed to spend in this arrangement that I just mentioned approximately $5.7 billion US in the next 5 years on ensuring that there is investment in these fields. BP has agreed to participate in negotiations with Shell and the government from the middle to discuss during the month of May as we're going forward, to discuss this whole question of what is to happen with the LNG plant, not the least of which is the renewal of the contract for Train 1, which is coming to an end this year, and the other trains, which while not coming to an end, those contracts need to be reviewed so that in the context of simplifying the LNG business and the LNG operations, we expect that some significant outcome would flow from the government bringing BP and Shell to the table to discuss a review of these arrangements, meaning basically improved terms for Trinidad and Tobago and for those involved in the business. What we're looking for is a more equitable arrangement and an arrangement that is more transparent and an arrangement that I dare say should be more profitable, because once we have an undisturbed stream of gas and we're not facing curtailments and plant closures and contracts that are not renegotiated and so on, we create a better environment for profitability and prosperity. So those were the 2 days of work on Monday and Tuesday of last week. The CHOGM, prior to the actual opening of the CHOGM on Thursday, we had a number of meetings. In fact, there were about 30 meetings that we participated in. And because we had a strong team, we were able to be represented in all of these meetings. I led some, Minister Young led some, and Minister Moses led some, because a lot of these meetings were going on simultaneously. And you would have seen from reports coming back to you where we were at any given point in time. Minister Young met with a number of British agencies on matters of national security, and sometime at a later stage we can give you some more information on those matters of cooperation with respect to the matters that he led in dealing with the British government team. He met with the National Crime Agency, the London Metropolitan Police, the SO-15, the British National Security Agencies, and the former London Metropolitan Commissioner of Police, Lord Bernard Hogan-Howe. These discussions centered around the fight against corruption, improving national security, working with international agencies, and general crime fighting, human trafficking, and counterterrorism. As you know, Britain is one of our major partners in our counterterrorism strategies because they have a larger footprint across the world, and we rely very heavily on Britain to assist us in us managing our own difficulties where they may lie there. And of course, the very latest of the challenges that we are facing, the whole question of cyber crimes. We have a cyber crime bill on the way to the Parliament, and this whole issue of what goes on in cyberspace is of great concern to all of us, and we were getting advice and assistance from Britain. Minister Young led those discussions. Minister Moses led the discussions along with, and he mentioned, part of the team that I didn't mention was High Commissioner Orville London, who was an integral part of the team, and he did take part in some of the events, not the least of which was the whole question of the Windrush matter, which had begun to appear before we got to London. And Minister Moses, Foreign Minister, Ambassador, High Commissioner London, they were dealing with that. And I don't know if you all are aware that there were people, we found this out as the matter rose to the top during the CHOGM, that there were actually people from Trinidad and Tobago who were actually deported from Britain. And this went under the radar until it came to the High Commission not too long ago. And the High Commission, I met one such person on Monday night who was quite grateful for the assistance that she had received from our mission in London when she faced that issue before it became an international embarrassment. And there were one or two other persons. The bulk of the people involved were from the Northern Caribbean, mainly Barbados and Jamaica. But we did have a number of Trinidad and Tobago citizens, and all of them and others from around the world would have been affected by this new development in British immigration policy. We came away from Britain under the understanding and given the commitments at all levels in Britain that this matter will be dealt with dispatch, right up to the level of the promise of compensation from the British Prime Minister to persons who would have been affected to the extent that some persons were not able to have a job, some persons were not able to access the medical services and incurred expenses that they shouldn't have incurred. The British Prime Minister has publicly stated in the Parliament that such persons would be identified and compensated. We are satisfied that they've put certain arrangements in place for persons to report their circumstance, and we'll monitor it very closely, and this will be done from our mission in London. I had the opportunity to meet in side meetings with Prime Minister Modi of India, who is very keen on cooperating with Trinidad and Tobago. I need not tell you Trinidad and Tobago and India have a long history of cooperation internationally and bilaterally. And Prime Minister Modi has invited me to visit India at some time that is convenient to Trinidad and Tobago. He's also offered very generously to provide us with help in training helicopter pilots, and that is no mean offer, because it is a tremendous expense to the government of Trinidad and Tobago to pay for helicopter pilot training in the US system, and India has offered to discuss and finalize with us an arrangement to have some of our pilots trained in India at the support of the Indian government. We did raise with him a matter which I don't want to go into too much detail today, but it's a matter of the Couva hospital. I did say early on, a few months, I think it was in January, I did say, or was it in December sometime, that we have been working towards a new model of bringing that hospital into the health service, but not just adding it to what is present now, but looking for a better mold that will give us a better outcome while making its services available to the country. And if by the end of April, I was not able to report to the country that we had found a mechanism, well, then we will just simply absorb that hospital into the healthcare delivery system and have that deal with challenges of one kind or another. I can tell you today that we have made some considerable progress, because in the last few months, the government, the University of the West Indies, and InterHealth Canada, we have come together, government as owner, the University of the West Indies as an institution that provides health training, and InterHealth Canada providing services in a mold and a model that we have not been accustomed to in Trinidad and Tobago. We've come up with an arrangement that allows the government of Trinidad and Tobago to kill a number of birds with one stone, not the least of which is to settle some significant debt that the government of Trinidad and Tobago owes to the University of the West Indies, and for which the University of the West Indies had come to the CARICOM meeting in Haiti and had made a plea that we try to settle this debt because it was posing a serious challenge and threat to the University of the West Indies. So we have had significant discussions at the level of the Chancellor of the University of the West Indies and with the InterHealth Canada. And in the next few weeks, we'll be able to give the details of what this really is and how it will work towards advancing healthcare delivery. Suffice it to say, what we're aiming for is an offshore medical school run by the University of the West Indies, providing cutting-edge service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, the region and the world, and also providing services which are not now available in the healthcare system in Trinidad and Tobago. So when that is ready, we'll make the appropriate announcements. And I took the opportunity to discuss this and raise this with Prime Minister Modi, because India is such a tremendous potential in the success of this direction, and he was very excited about it and indicated to his team that was there immediately to communicate with us and to see. And he also offered to ensure that India plays a role if a role is made available to India to take part in this. As a matter of fact, it was his suggestion that one of the offerings from this particular healthcare delivery system in Trinidad and Tobago, India could introduce and help us grow Ayurvedic medicine. So that was his offer to the conversation, and we will surely take him up on that. I also had one-on-one discussions with the Prime Minister of Australia with respect to any possibility of us getting Australian help in procuring new ferries to replace the ferries that we have on service now, which came from Australia, INCAT and hostile type vessels. If we can get Australian help on a government-to-government basis with respect to the need to have new vessels, because the ones that we have now, we have limited sea life, and given what happened in the last year, we certainly will not want to have a repeat of that. So the government is currently looking ahead with respect to the ordering of new vessels, so that when the time comes, we will not end up in the situation we ended up in 2017, 2018. So those were, if you go on the CHOGM website, the Commonwealth Secretariat website, you will see all the detail by now, I'm sure, of the communique, which will cover the issues that we agreed on and signed off on unanimously. There was no dissent on those matters that you see us signing off in there. And of course, you would have heard that the head of the Commonwealth would be stepping down. When, we don't know, but she has requested of the Commonwealth that Prince Charles be considered for head of the Commonwealth. This was quite an unusual or unique situation from the monarch head of the Commonwealth. It was discussed at length in the caucus of the heads. All 53 heads were there, and it's a very lively discussion. And in the end, it was unanimously agreed that the 53 heads of the Commonwealth would accede to the request of Her Majesty. So we are, sometime in the not too distant future, would expect that the headship of the Commonwealth would pass to Prince Charles, who is also on his way to becoming the monarch of Britain. And of course, this is a discussion that was very interesting in the UK, and I would have had, for some reason, I was sought out to speak on this matter, so the die has been cast. So, if you have any questions on the matters I have raised, I would like to take those questions from you first, and questions on other matters which you may have come with. So if you have any questions about what let's deal with those first.
Welcome back. I'm Carla Ridgewell from
Thank you. Somebody welcome me back.
I'm Carla Ridgewell from the Newsday. Just to clarify, can you tell us who's on the empowered negotiating team?
We have not finalized it yet. That will have to be by next Thursday. The cabinet will sign off on that.
Okay.
So next Thursday you'll be told that, because it requires a cabinet, but it will be extracted from the Energy Subcommittee talent pool. Okay. And of course, we have hired, when we came out with the spotlight on energy, we would have indicated to you a lot of what we came with arose out of the hiring of Poten, which is the company that did the gas master plan. This initiative goes step by step. We had a gas master plan, which the cabinet digested for some months. We were satisfied that the company that did that job did a good job and was a company. We looked around that company that we had in-house on the gas master plan. We asked them to work further with us, going deeper into the issues. So by the time we got to the spotlight on energy, we were able to use them to put their own reputation on the line by presenting to the public what they were saying to us on these issues. So you would recall that Poten did take a part. We also did acknowledge then that we had some weaknesses in the Ministry of Energy with respect to our ability to sit around the table with the oil companies and have adequate information and support. So what we did, we sought and obtained and hired an expert law firm from New York that specializes in this business, that has no conflict with these oil companies, no conflict in terms of doing any business with them, but now working for the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The name of that company is White & Case. And that, yes, that's a New York law firm that specializes in this business of gas negotiations and contract negotiations and so on. They have been on board with us. They were with us before we went to London, and they will continue to be part of our team in dealing with the issues I raised here today.
Okay, great. And well, can you tell us how much money does the government owe BP in VAT refunds?
It's a lot.
More than $1 billion? More than $1 billion balance out.
No. It's about no, it's not going to balance out, because the payment of the VAT is paid over a period of time. And that is why it was important to say that we got agreement from the oil company to work out some manageable arrangement for the VAT refunds. We don't want the VAT refunds to cancel out the payment of the debt. But of course, we got the debt acknowledged, and we got the monies coming. So we're in a better position.
So we don't have a number for these VAT refunds, even if it's over time.
think
Like, what's the
started,
total? What's the total figure even?
The total figure is about, I don't want to speak for the Minister of Finance. It's over 100 million US.
Over 100 million US.
Yeah.
So this $1 billion that BP owes us, it's TT or US?
It's the 1.2 billion TT. Okay. But that is monies that was in dispute that we have now got agreement on.
Okay.
And the other, which would have been the tax that they were going to pass on to NGC, which they now have agreed in negotiation not to pass on, that is about that would be over $1 billion as well. As soon as the teams meet, and we are close to signing off on those things. We have a few days of discussion, well, a few meetings that, to just tidy up the loose ends, but these are the agreements that we had. So this should be coming relatively soon.
Sorry, just to clarify, that money is going straight to the Treasury, right? Not to the NGC.
Some of it goes to NGC. Yeah, but the NGC pays dividends to the Treasury. So it's basically one owner. The NGC is 100% owned by the government of Trinidad and Tobago.
The interim proposal that Shell has made to increase government revenue, the interim proposal by Shell to increase government revenue.
Yeah, but that will come out of us having agreements on the whole question of how the LNG is marketed. We were being deprived from benefits by virtue of how LNG was being marketed and how the trains were being, if I use the word loosely, owned, right? Because we have, there are different contracts and different offtake arrangements where the government of Trinidad and Tobago has certain positions on some trains and no positions on other trains. And of course, you would have heard us complaining early on about something called transfer pricing. Well, we have to have new arrangements that would minimize that sort of thing, because we also have the whole question of who gets cargoes, when and where the cargoes are marketed, and so on and so on. We did have also, I didn't mention this, one of the big issues that we discussed at length was the use of Henry Hub as the reference. It is Trinidad and Tobago's position that Henry Hub is not an appropriate reference point for us because we're not doing any export to the United States at Henry Hub. And that is what was being used by the companies, and we were being disadvantaged there.
That's a very interesting point then. So what will it entail then for us to move from Henry Hub to, and what would the other benchmarks?
That's what we're discussing now. But we do have a template. I don't want to raise that now because we have not finalized that yet. But we do have an alternative on the table.
Okay, and okay. Can you just elaborate a little bit about some of the points you made on Atlantic, especially with the plans to increase the government's revenue from Atlantic and the negotiations with the trains?
Well, I would not want to say more than I've already said. As I said, it has to do with simplifying the LNG business in Trinidad and Tobago and revisiting the existing contracts in that simplification. And that simplification will go from it wouldn't significantly change ownership, but it will change how the ownership works, how the contracts are interpreted, and how the marketing takes place.
Okay. And well, you mentioned something saying an undisturbed stream of gas. Is this domestic gas, or is this connected to the Dragon deal that is expected at some point?
Everything I've said so far has to do with domestic gas from Trinidad and Tobago. I didn't say much about the expectation of Venezuelan fields coming here. That's a separate issue, which we did discuss, and there's great promise in that area. And as you know, Shell is partnering with us for the Dragon Field initiative. We're very close to the conclusion of that, and there are other prospects as well. BP also has bought out Chevron. Chevron is an owner on Loran Manatee. And the ownership of BP on Loran Manatee, sorry, not BP, Shell. Shell has bought out Chevron. And because of that, it is now making it easier for us to move towards finalization of operations of that field. Loran Manatee. Dragon is an across the border field. Eh? Yeah. Dragon is all Venezuelan. Yeah. That is what.
All Venezuelan?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But it's close to us.
Yeah.
It's close to the Hibiscus platform, which is owned by Shell and Trinidad and Tobago. So the whole idea is to get Dragon gas to us through the Hibiscus platform to Point 14. That's what we've been working on for the last few months.
Be signed? When's that Dragon deal going to be signed?
We have one outstanding issue which we are close to conclusion on, and we are on standby to conclude that anytime now.
Anytime now?
Yes.
So like what, within the next week?
I wouldn't say much more than that. Anytime now. I might get a call now if I'm talking to you.
All right.
What is the size of the debt to you? And this proposal could be for sure.
Heavy debt, moving target.
What does it mean?
The government of Trinidad and Tobago and UWI, we still have to settle on the figure. We acknowledge that we do owe them some money, but the exact figure is still in dispute. But we operate in a very friendly environment. As a matter of fact, the Minister of Education is leaving today, to go to a UGC meeting, a council meeting, where these matters are being discussed. It's approximately 200 million TT dollars, accumulated over a number of years. But UWI, being a university, has a lot of people who can carry a debt on a promise. So we have to sort out what is the debt, the real debt, and then try and sort it out. And but we do owe UWI a fair amount of money.
And this offshore medical school, this is in addition to the UE? That is
Yes. Separate and apart from what exists now in UWI.
So that would be our school or UE school?
It will be a joint venture between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the University of the West Indies, with an involvement from InterHealth Canada. That's being negotiated right now.
And where would it be?
It will start with the Couva hospital, but we are hoping that it could extend. This whole question of medical tourism and so on could extend to the Scarborough Hospital in Tobago.
So is it that the Couva hospital will now become a teaching hospital
Yes,
instead of
that is the intention.
the government is no longer looking for the public-private partnership to...
Well, that's what it is. InterHealth Canada is private. And of course, UWI in this, there would be a commercial aspect to it. Right? So it's a novel arrangement, and it's quite, I'll be pleased to announce it in the coming weeks.
Will it still be pediatric? Or
Well, even though it was being called the Couva Children Hospital, that was for elections. Of the number of rooms, only a small number of beds there were children beds. There were more adult beds there. It was catering for more adults than children. So it's not really a children's hospital as such, like the Mount Hope Children's Hospital. It was a hospital where a small part of it was a pediatric ward. There were more adult facilities than children. But that's not a problem, because we now are going to make maximum use of it and use it as a basis to enter this lucrative area of offshore medical training.
Prime Minister Drew Brown from TV6 News, as you look at that, what about the issue of specialized pediatric care? Is that something government is looking at, be it at Couva or elsewhere?
We already have specialized medical pediatric care 6 miles away from that hospital. We have at Mount Hope a children's hospital. So specialized pediatric care is available there. And of course, at Couva, there will also be a pediatric ward. And of course, the new operators and owners will determine how far we go with this hospital. We're not just opening a hospital and walking to it. We are looking for an expanded idea as part of the expansion of the economy. This whole question of medical tourism is something we are seeking to tap into by taking the opportunity of this new hospital being a basis for going in that direction, and with bringing in the university to provide training for our people, plus others who may want training and pay for it. We are taking advantage of who we are and where we are.
The Windrush issue, do you have any idea how many Trinidadian nationals would have been affected by that?
No, we don't have a figure, but what we do know is that there are probably hundreds of people, right, who are affected. And the effect is so widespread that it's not just the individuals themselves, it is their families and so on. So it's a much larger problem. And because what has happened with it, which is why we in the Caribbean were so upset about it, what the British laws over time sought to do was to make illegal what was in fact deemed to have been legal. And this was facilitated to some extent by persons who were not paying attention as the laws were changing. And it got to the point where the policy and I'm quoting the British people here themselves, the policy had become one of creating a hostile environment for such persons. So this thing worked its way all the way from welcome, come and help, to go home. And government policy changed along the way, and that is why political parties in Britain are now pointing fingers at each other. And interestingly enough, the chairman of this CHOGM happens to have been the Home Secretary, who had a serious role to play in what the outcome was. So we found ourselves in a situation where we had to be very diplomatic, but be very firm in treating with this matter. And it's not going to end today. This is going to go on for quite some time until all these people in the system and their families are satisfied that they have the status that they require and that they deserve in the United Kingdom.
So you said that you met one of these individuals, one individual who was affected by this particular issue.
Yeah, when I met with nationals, that's the last thing I did on Monday night. I met our mission organized for me to meet. I met with a few hundred of our nationals at a hotel in London. And this issue, as you would expect, formed a big part of the discussion. And there was actually one person there who had been through the whole system, was deemed to be illegal, sent home. Actually, it happened when she tried to renew a passport and was put out of Britain, came back, and in fact, our mission intervened and got it reversed, and she came back to, she was there to tell us the story.
You said quite a few of our nationals were affected. Do you have any idea what's the status with them now, if they are here in Trinidad, or have they been returned to the UK?
No, I don't know from a numbers point of view. In terms of persons who were deported, that might be a small number. We in Trinidad and Tobago, our numbers who qualify under the Windrush invitation and who went there when we were a British colony. People who went to Britain in the 40s and the 50s, we were a British colony and we were entitled just to turn up in England because we had British citizenship. And therefore, when that happened, persons who went in under that understanding, many of them, when the laws were adjusted to cause them to come and register, to be identified, many persons took comfort in the fact that they came from that origin and didn't have to do that, only to find out later on that somebody knock on your door and say, you are an illegal. And that's where the trouble started.
This might be a good point to bring in another immigration issue, if you'd allow us to move away from CHOGM for a bit. The issue of the deportation of 82 Venezuelan nationals. Now, this country has come under severe criticism for the move. Have you spoken to the National Security Minister, and are you satisfied with how that process took place?
I am very satisfied that Trinidad and Tobago is a country governed by laws. We are a generous and caring people, and we've demonstrated that over and over again. And it's against that background that we will not allow persons for one reason or the other to paint us in any other color, and we will not allow, without protest, public servants from any international agency to misrepresent our circumstance to the world and stay in Trinidad and Tobago. Against that background, I, as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, will, under my hand, write a complaint to the United Nations at its headquarters about the conduct of persons who take it upon themselves to speak about Trinidad and Tobago. We are a member of the United Nations, and a very, very careful and responsible one. And if officers of the UN are going to talk about Trinidad and Tobago, especially those who are in Trinidad and Tobago and know our circumstance, then the least we can expect of them is to stay with the facts with respect to Trinidad and Tobago.
Are those facts that, they're obviously saying that there were refugees or people who had applied for asylum in that group that was deported?
Of course,
are you disputing that fact?
No, I'm not disputing that at all. But there's a whole plethora of issues. There are people who apply for asylum, and there are people who have been granted asylum. Applying for asylum doesn't mean that you have to be given asylum. You may apply. All of these are, but that's not the issue. What is being said is that Trinidad and Tobago has behaved in a manner unbecoming of Trinidad and Tobago, and that is not the fact. What we have here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have difficulties in a neighboring state. There are people from that state who have difficulties at home, and as I said earlier on, we are a generous and caring people. We have arrangements which allow Venezuelans to come to Trinidad and Tobago, to stay for a short while, return to Venezuela, obtain supplies if they have to, and so on. That is what has been going on. As the situation in Venezuela deteriorated, more and more persons were coming, and we were in fact assisting as we are able to. Bear in mind, we are not China, we're not Russia, we're not America, we are a little island, limited space, 1.3 million people, and therefore we cannot and will not allow the UN spokespersons to convert us into a refugee camp. Our relationship with Venezuela is one of mutual friendship and assistance, and it's against that background why we have been keeping our doors open. And some of those who are talking now about Trinidad and Tobago, you know what they did in situations like this? They just put everybody on visas and tell you no up front. Remember that? There was a time when we used to go to Canada, back and forth as well. Once you got a little difficulty here, what happened? And to behave as though repatriation of persons who found themselves. Let me draw to the attention of all those who have a lot to say. The people who were in those detention centers were not put there because they were Venezuelans. They were put there because they ran afoul of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And it irks me when people in this country appoint themselves spokespersons for our country, but have nothing good to say about this place and seek to put us in the worst possible light where our interest is not defended. I will defend the interests of Trinidad and Tobago. Those persons ended up in the detention center, not because they were Venezuelans. There are other people in there from other countries. They ended up in there because they ran afoul of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And whether you are a refugee or not, one of the requirements in this country is to observe the laws. We know, only 2 or 3 weeks ago, the conversation was how many Venezuelans are in Trinidad and Tobago. Many of them enter in this country through illegal ports. That was the conversation. And then the conversation was after that, how many more the government is going to allow to come into the country. I didn't hear anybody then accusing us of being uncaring. We were being accused of being too caring and allowing too many Venezuelans to come into this country. And of course, in this kind of conversation, there are those who will miss the point completely. That insofar as we are required to provide assistance to Venezuelans, if they reach our shores, it has to be done within the context of them being legal in this country. Because if they operate in this country illegally, they are now exposed to a hell in Trinidad and Tobago that might be greater than in Venezuela. And let me explain that to you. People who know that they're illegal in Trinidad from Venezuela are the ones who will be exploited for prostitution, for cheap labor, and for all manner of evil. So one problem in Venezuela is imported into Trinidad and can end up being worse. I saw this morning on television 2 women being interviewed, Venezuelans talking about their life in Trinidad. And it wasn't good. Because once you are not covered by the law, you are exposed. And that's not only in Trinidad and Tobago. All across Southern Europe is happening now. Africans and Asians and people from Eastern Europe are exposing that once you are coming in as a migrant, you have to be careful that you do not end up in a situation where people in the country or where you turn up in don't treat you. Some of the stories of migrants en route to Southern Europe are heartbreaking stories. So we have this problem here with Venezuela, and the best that Trinidad and Tobago could do is to manage the situation, provide as much assistance as possible for persons who come and go back. We certainly cannot provide, right, open door policy for anybody who comes. And of course, when you claim refugee status, there is a process. And if the government of Trinidad and Tobago, as I'm told, has people in a detention center, and those persons indicate a willingness to go back to Venezuela rather than remain in the detention center, what do you want us to do?
Is that the administration?
Economic refugees as opposed to...
I'm glad you mentioned that. Economic migrants do not automatically or easily qualify for refugee status. Otherwise, all of us here in Trinidad and Tobago who want to be in America could just jump on a plane and go there. Every unemployed person in Trinidad and Tobago could buy a ticket, if you could afford it, and go to Florida. You're an economic migrant because you can't get a job in Trinidad and Tobago. Or you prefer to have a chance for your children in America. It doesn't go so. And let me remind you, this is not the first time that people have been repatriated, having migrated to a country seeking better conditions. On a regular basis, other CARICOM countries send people back. And I need not mention Haiti. Well, every Monday morning, Haitians are sent back from developed countries with more resources than we have. But we who have done so much, right, to be friendly and caring to our Venezuelan neighbors, we have to listen to UN public servants telling us that we should get their say-so to determine what we do in Trinidad and Tobago.
Amnesty International, Prime Minister.
That is better left unsaid. Because I tell you, those criticisms are not supported by the facts.
You're just one at a time, please.
That there is this difference in the way, I mean, you mentioned Haiti, and I remember years ago, there were Haitian footballers coming here, and the population was very hostile to the idea of them seeking refugee status. And the government at the time said, not one Haitian, and everybody applauded. And there are people from CARICOM countries which are sent back. Jamaica, we've had a problem with Barbados and so on. And there has not been this kind of outcry when they are sent back. The national community, many of them, the opposition, the different political parties, are agitating for the Venezuelan refugees. Why do you think there is this difference in the way that they are being seen, treated, perceived, why the government is being called upon?
Well, it has to be that they're Venezuelans. Could we move on to another question, please? I'm sure you know the answer.
There's a suggestion that maybe we should provide an amnesty so that some of the Venezuelans who are in this country can register and they're allowed to not just pay taxes but maybe given work permits and so on. Is that something the National Security Ministry is considering?
I just try to explain. There's a whole plethora of possibilities and issues to deal with. We grant an amnesty in Little Trinidad, right? Every bay around Trinidad and Tobago is open for entry. And then you get 10,000, 15,000 people. The amnesty covers them. What is your story? Especially at this time where we are struggling to find opportunities for our own people. And I dare remind you, and I'll come back to Ria's question, when the Dominicans were thrashed by hurricane, no place to live, nothing to eat, nowhere to go, I said in this country, reach out to Dominica as much as you could, even open your doors to them. What was your reaction then? Dominica is a CARICOM country. The reaction by some people was, don't do that, you can't do that. But I maintain that we are caring people and we have never shirked our responsibility to reach out to those who are in need to the extent of our ability to support them. Whether it is providing support for Haiti with an earthquake, for a hurricane. Only once in the history of this country did our government not rise to that occasion. But we leave that for today. But we are not going to have people tell us, right, that we are what we are not, and then we take it out of fear. We can defend our position.
Are we acknowledging that there is a crisis in Venezuela and there is an influx of people into this country? And if so, how are we dealing with it?
It's because we are acknowledging that why we are very careful in how we handle it. Because if we mishandle it, it can create serious problems for us. There are people who want us to join them in invading Venezuela. We're not doing that. There are people who want us to come out and speak and say the Venezuelan government is this, the Venezuelan government is that. They could stay where they are and do that. We're not doing that. Venezuela is our closest neighbor, and we work on neighborly relationships. And the assistance we provide is the assistance that we could afford. We have a few who are refugees. You identify that by interview. You have economic migrants. You have those who come with guns and ammunition. We have a whole range of things to deal with. So no single switch you flick to deal with this problem. This government has been managing this issue very well, if I may say so myself, to maintain our assistance to Venezuela in more ways than one, open our doors to Venezuelans in more days than one day, find criminals who come into our borders and get them back where they belong. Persons who end up in the detention center are to be repatriated. And you know something? We have some Nigerians in that place. The reason why they're still in there is because they are to be repatriated. And that repatriation is to be done by their home government, who has said, we're not paying that. And it's only if we charter a plane from here to Nigeria that we can get them there at tremendous cost. And from time to time, we have to do that. Repatriation is not new. And that is why I'm saying, if we don't say anything, those who jump on this bandwagon would give the impression that we have suddenly got up and become heartless in Trinidad and Tobago. If you find yourself in the detention center, it's either because you've overstayed your time or you've run afoul of the law in some other way. That's why you're being detained. That's why we have a detention center. And when you get there, if you have the option to go back to where you've come from, we're happy to send you back where you come from.
Conditions at the detention center are humane enough, because I hear the minister say that they went back voluntarily, and there is this constant debate on whether they did do so. Is it that the conditions are so bad, so horrific, that if you go and consult your own paper, you will see not too long ago news items where the minister and the officers there showed the tremendous work we had done to improve the living conditions in that place, to make it not the Hilton Hotel, but to make it a place where you could have people, and there was no complaint about the conditions in the center. Because we have gone out of our way. The first persons who complained were persons who have been there for a long time, and there were conditions there which were substandard. We took steps to expend monies to ensure that the conditions are conditions of which we can be satisfied is what meets the best practice. We have the center there because we know, and we've been experiencing it, that people are coming into our country, overstaying their time, and would have to be controlled. When they get in there, the next step is to repatriate them. Because even if they apply for refugee status and they're determined to be economic migrants, they will not be granted refugee status. So this talk about people who are not allowed to apply for, that's why you have to apply. And then you have to be interviewed. And then you have to be determined by the host country if you are in fact a refugee.
Criticism, Prime Minister, that in this instance, the government collaborated with a government from which people were trying to get away from.
The only collaboration there was transportation. Transportation. Right? The Venezuelan government offered transport.
And they're the ones who have the responsibility.
And the responsibility for repatriation, I just said, is with the home country. And that's why the Nigerian government, having said no to us here, because of the cost of repatriating Nigerians, they are in the detention center and now fall to Trinidad and Tobago to assume the responsibility of their parent country. So if the responsibility is on the supplying country, and that country supplies transport, where is the offense? There has been no report that those persons in detention were coerced by the Venezuelan government. That is misinformation that is being fed out there by people who have other agendas.
With President Maduro on this repatriation?
No.
Do you intend?
I had the last time I had discussions with President Maduro on repatriation was in this building about Trinidad and Tobago citizens in Venezuelan jails. Remember that?
When was the last time you talked to Mr. Maduro?
A few months ago.
Okay, but are we
Gas situation make this whole thing complicated for us?
Especially for the Dragon field gas deal.
Does it make it very complex for us and for us to speak?
No, we have maintained and conducted ourselves in such a manner that it has not and it should not.
The Venezuelan parliament has indicated that it will write or request a meeting with this country regarding members of the opposition, but they are in control of the parliament, my understanding.
We will speak to Venezuelan authorities as long as they're the authorized persons, and anybody in Venezuela who wants to speak to us, government or opposition, we'll be happy to indicate to them the facts of the situation. And I'm sure when they are seized of the facts, they too will thank us for being good hosts to their countrymen in a time of great difficulty, because they too will know that Venezuelan borders are protected from non-Venezuelans.
Are we concerned about any economic fallout? Well, first of all, from our reputation because of the international coverage.
It is because I am concerned about our reputation why I am not backing away from defending it from persons who will misrepresent our circumstance.
And what about economic? I mean, there are obviously sanctions against Venezuela. Are we concerned that that will somehow affect us?
Sanctions from who?
Sanctions on individuals in the government as well.
Let me just pick that up. I speak for Trinidad and Tobago, the sovereign state of Trinidad and Tobago. We conduct our business with great responsibility and care and respect. And having said that, it covers all that you have raised there.
Okay,
MP Darrell Smith, that was requested.
No, I have received a request for an extra 2 weeks because the team requires to interview some people who were out of the country, and I have granted that extension of 2 weeks.
What about the Christopher Thomas report?
Yes, I've received that report today. I've received that report, and it would be...
When will you have any feedback on that?
Have you read the report and do you?
I've read it, yes.
You don't sound enthused about it, sir. Is it different from? Is there anything
We
different
don't need
from
to
it?
ask what is.
I've read it. I have to study it.
And before you study it, are you prepared to say what the basic
Is it different from anything you said before?
I've said so much to you today. I'm sure you're suffering from information overload. No, I will make it available in the next few days.
Prime Minister, so there's no connection between the repatriation exercise that occurred with the Venezuelans and the discussions for cross-border gas between Trinidad and
None
Tobago.
whatsoever. And any attempt to link them in that way is pure mischief.
Oh, and who's asking us to invade Venezuela?
Probably Grenada, I don't know.
All right, Joel.
The opposition leader has taken the position that the Cambridge Analytica investigation, they will not participate in it, and she's instead calling for an investigation into two other companies that I have them right here, but I can't find them, that the PNM use, data mining companies. How do you respond to that?
Let me make it very clear here now. Whatever resources, entities or persons the PNM used in the 2015 campaign, not by a long stretch of imagination can any of their input be deemed to be anything like the allegations being made against the UNC by persons in Cambridge Analytica who worked with the UNC. What the opposition leader is trying to do in a Monday night rattle is to try to make it into a situation where all of us, there are serious distinctions between us and the UNC for which they will have to account. And for the opposition to take the position that they will not participate in a joint select committee of the Parliament, which is meant to find out the facts of this situation, should tell you all you need to know about Mrs. Prasad Bissessa and the government that she ran and the opposition that she's running now. That action alone should tell you all you need to know. Permit me to draw to your attention that I, as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, in a situation where there's an issue with the port, and my government was being pilloried left, right, and center by all those who enjoyed that, I didn't back away from going before a joint select committee and be cross-examined by members of Parliament. So therein lies the difference. Last question.
Just tag on to that particular thing. The Attorney General recently gave an indication that perhaps the whistleblower in this particular matter could appear before the Joint Select Committee to give evidence.
Well, I think the opposition leader's position is trying to send a signal to such persons not to cooperate. But we are cooperating with the British authorities, and we've indicated that this matter will be fully ventilated before the Parliament, with or without the perpetrators. Thank you very much.